This is my second session here. In the previous talk I gave, we went and dug into doing some fairly interesting stuff with asynchronous programming. And what I want to do today is actually just look at something a little more normal day to day. And I want to just sort of take a Perl5 module and walk through doing an port of it to Perl6. And first of all, we're going to do the fairly literal port, so we'll just take it and not really take advantage of any of the sort of seismic shifts that Perl6 makes, just get it to work, and then we'll see how we can take things from there and get a fairly big algorithmic improvement. So I was looking for a module that was self-contained, that did a variety of different things, and that was written by an experienced Perl5 programmer I knew of, because I actually wanted to sort of demonstrate taking what I hope is quite reasonable Perl5 code and turning it into reasonable Perl6 code. So I chose CSS Tiny by Adam Kennedy, who I know has written an awful lot of modules, so it seemed like a reasonable bet to take one of his. And I liked it in the sense it lets me talk about a bunch of text processing stuff, which Perl is of course very into, some basic object-oriented programming, and some stuff with basic I/O and data structures. So we can start to sort of tease apart the differences in the languages as we port this. Okay, so what does CSS Tiny do? Well, it basically is a very basic CSS, with style sheets for the web, parser, and generator. So it has a few methods on it. It has read and write methods, which will both read CSS file from disk and write it to disk. They can also work with strings. There's read string and write string that you can see there. And besides that, they let you manipulate it. So you can actually create a new one and write it out to disk as well. And it works as a two-level hash. So you have the styles at the top, and then within each of those, you have various sort of properties that you can set in that style. So just to sort of show you the API in action, I actually have the ported version here, and I just loaded it up there using the Perl6 REPL. So now I've got it available, we can just make a new style sheet here. We'll use CSS Tiny, and we'll do .read, and I actually have a little CSS file, and okay, that gives me a new instance of CSS Tiny. And then I can actually just use it a lot like a hash. So I can go and say things like, well, I'd like to sort of see the set of, well, we can actually the set of styles, which is the keys of the hash. So it defines those styles. And I guess we can do .pairs to sort of get out some more details. You can see that's a sort of hash of hashes. In fact, maybe this is going to make things a little clearer. So you can see we have some basic style sheet stuff going on there. And I can actually modify it, so we can take it and we can take, let's turn the H1's color into, what color shall we have? Let's go with green. Okay, of course I wanted the assignment statements in there. No, what did I do wrong? Oh, the variable. Oh, there we are. Okay, so we've set that to green, which means that if I now go and look at the pairs, it's green, and if I just take this object and we write it into a string, then you can see it produces a little style sheet again like that, and it's got the green in there this time. So, okay. Let's take a look at doing So we sort of wander into the module, and you know, we're sort of at the top of it, and we'll start there. And what I'm just doing here is actually just showing you the differences as we go for each step. So the first thing you're going to do, you see a red line for minus, that's just a removal. Okay, a green line is a plus, is an addition, and anything around it is just giving you some context. So what we'll do here is, you know, we can just remove the use strict, and the reason is that that's actually the default in Perl6. So there's no reason to write use strict there, that can just go away. So that's a line saved straight off. And if you actually actually look at what CSS_tiny is and how you use it, you're going to realize, well, it's a class. And we can actually start using Perl6's object model quite straightforwardly. All we're going to do is we'll just change the word package into class. And now we're actually dealing with a real class rather than just a simple package. So the next thing that we'll do is we'll just go and look at this line here which sets the version of the module. Now, it's been mentioned a few times already here that we have all kinds of nice module versioning things. Actually, part of the way that works is that we actually pull the version into the module name. So the short name, we would say, of this module is CSS_tiny, but we can actually take the version information and just go and stick it as an adverb. It's that pair syntax again. Okay, it's everywhere in Perl6, this bit of syntax. And that's what we have there. So we just remove that version variable and we just attach it to the name. Which, if you think about it, you know, if we're going to install different named, versions of modules, we need a way to name that. So it makes a lot of sense because of that. Okay, so that's that a little bit gone. Now, since I made it a class, I now am working within the Perl6 object system. Actually, whenever you create a class, and you've written that, it's inheriting from the default Perl6 base class, which is called view, and that actually provides us with a default new method, okay, just out of the box. So we don't have to write one of those ourselves. We don't need one here. So all I'm going to do is just toss the one that came from the Perl5 code. Okay, we get that for free as well. So that's just another simple little deletion. So let's just take a look at doing some basic transformations on methods. So here we had a sub, HTML. Now, of course, everything's a sub in Perl5, but in Perl6 we start to distinguish different kinds of code objects, and that includes splitting out sub and method. So what we'll do is we'll just switch sub for method here. If you actually leave it as sub, you cannot call it as a method in the class. Okay, if you write a sub within the class, it's completely fine, but it's lexical. Okay, it's just a little bit of infrastructure you've declared in your class. It won't get exported, it won't be visible from the outside. It's very good for keeping things nice and encapsulated. But the methods that we want to put on the class, we have to put the word method there, and we give it a name. And just by writing method, we actually get the self declared for us. You can see I have this self symbol there. And so we're using dot for method call. Okay, the rest of the code in here on that line is pretty much just the same though. So what we're doing is we're just doing white string. Okay, if it fails, we'll return the empty string. So that's how we transform those. Now there's another slight issue on the next line, which is that the interpolation rules are a little bit different. So if we just take a look at what's changed here. Okay, it's happening over here. So the dollar and the curly syntax is kind of gone. We don't use that anymore. We instead can always do closure interpolation though. So the way that you would do it here is you actually just put a block and then you just put $CSS in there. And that means you can do any kind of block there. So if you want to just do a block that does a little addition, and include that in the output string, all you have to do is include something plus something inside the block, and it will just interpolate the result of the block. So that's a nice generalization. Okay, so that method wasn't too hard. I think we're done with that one now. And we can actually go and do a pretty identical one with another method in the module. There's nothing new here really. Okay, the transforms start getting fairly kind of normal once you get going. So that is just transforming the second one. Okay, there we go. All right, so next up, let's take on one of the more interesting module methods inside of this. So what's going on in here? Well, first of all, we'll do the method thing again. So we'll turn sub into method. Okay, that means we'll get the self. And then we're going to, instead of actually having to shift the class like this, we actually get that for free. So that's something that can go away because it's a method now. Okay, so that will be itself. Self doesn't care whether you're calling it on the class or on an instance. Okay, if you call it on the class, you get the type in the self. If you call it on an instance, you get the instance in the self. We don't really distinguish the two. So the next thing we'll do is, instead of actually shifting the file name and then having to do our own error checking over here, we'll simply just move that $file up into the signature there. And this has a number of benefits. It not only sort of makes it very clear upfront what we're expecting, it allows us to produce better error messages automatically, and in some cases, not so much with methods, but definitely with subroutines, we can actually detect some errors like this at compile time rather than runtime as well. So we get a lot out of signatures. Okay, so that's a small cleanup. What about all of this file checking? Well, this is where things get a little bit interesting, because in Perl6 we actually have a notion of sort of a lazy exception. Let me explain this a little bit. So there's generally two kinds of ways that APIs work in regard to errors. You typically get ones that, if anything goes wrong, they die, they explode, you have to catch the exception if you want to handle it, and it's very loud. You absolutely know an exception happened. Then you also have those where they sort of say, well, people tend to like to do something in reaction to failure without necessarily sort of dealing with catching an exception. And they don't really want the out-of-band nature of exceptions. And we do all sorts of things there. We sometimes go and have return codes. We sometimes return an undefined value, and sort of see the sort of underscore error call we're making here with actually sending an error message, and it then goes and returns undefined. And then you have a way of retrieving this error. So this pattern is sort of okay, but we've kind of gone and sort of reified it a bit more deeply into the language in Perl6. So we now have a function called fail. Fail is a kind of return. It actually returns just like the return keyword does, but instead of returning just the value, it returns a failure. A failure is basically an unthrown exception. So if you use the failure in a Boolean context, or you check if it's defined, so you do say / or a double bar, then that sort of diffuses the exception. It says, well, you've done something to sort of say, here's the alternative behavior. But if you just leave the failure in what we call sync context, that is in the void context, then it will actually explode just like a normal exception. So it's kind of a little bit safer than just doing a return value. You kind of have a kind of more reliability in the fact that it's going to be checked if it's ignored, and ignoring it will cause the exception to be thrown, but you leave the convenience of being able to treat failure as a value, which is why people do APIs like this at all. Okay, so the first thing that we'll do is just get rid of this custom error infrastructure. Okay, return, class, error, and we'll replace all of those with fail. Okay, fail, fail, fail. Lots of fail. So what about these file operators? We'll come back to those in just a minute. But before I do that, okay, let's just clean up after my last refactor. So I've decided I'm going to use fail now. So what I can do is I can just delete this error string here. I can delete error string there, which was returning it. I can delete underscore error, which was setting the error into there and returning undef. Okay, so all this boilerplate can just go away because we're using fail instead, and it sort of gives us this in the language. Okay, so now we've cleaned that up, let's go back and just think a little bit about how we can deal with the file checks. Now, we don't quite sort of perm strings so much as we do in Perl5. We also don't have quite so many special cases. And one of the special cases that has sort of gone away in many senses is this -E, -f style file checks. They, for a special bit of syntax, they didn't really quite pull their weight, and they didn't really fit into the sort of overall parsing model of the language. So what they actually appear as now are just methods on a file handle. Okay, so they're just very simple method calls, and that's sort of okay. The only thing is that because you have to call them on an I/O handle, rather than just on a string. Okay, you can't just take a string file name and say .e. That is not going to work out. So we actually need them to be a file handle. Now, we can actually do something that's kind of convenient. So given, you might recognize as one part of sort of the smart matching thing that you get with given and when, but actually given is very, very useful on its own, because given is a topicalizer. It's something that puts something into $_. It's almost like a one-item for loop. And once you've done that, you can just refer to it using either $_, or in our case, we can just do .e, .f, and .r. Okay? And I mentioned that we have to turn it from a string into an IO handle, but actually we can do that once at the given. Okay, so given file .io, and then we can just go and drop various different little checks down over there. So yeah, I think that's kind of nice. We actually gained a line of code or two here, but I think that it was a kind of a win overall. And we just deleted a load of lines anyway. So, that was okay. So let's just take a look at the next little piece. So here we are doing a very typical thing. We are undeffing $/. That is the line separator. We then are reading the file in like this. And of course, the reason we did this is because we want to get all the lines of the file. And if you undef the separator, it slips the whole lot in. In Perl6, of course, we know we have slurp. We just need to be a little bit careful, because slurp will die if that file does not exist. Okay, that's an exception. And so far in this module, what we've been doing is being very sort of lazy about exceptions. We've been wanting to return some kind of failure rather than throwing the exception. So what we'll do is we'll actually just show a try there and wrap that around slurp file. And or else is the low precedence version of /. Okay, so that one is checking if the result of try was defined. If it wasn't, okay, it must have failed. So what we know is that the exception that try caught will be in $!, and then we'll just actually be able to fail with that very message. If you're curious about what try is doing there, actually try, I can show you this. If you just do a try and you like this, then it will happily swallow up that exception. And if we do that, look, we do that, then you can see that we actually had the exception dropped in there. But if you actually wanted to catch the exception, then you can actually put a catch block in there, and then you smart match on the exception type. So normally you want only looking for certain types of exception. Here we just have a string, so I'll just take the default and then we call it. Okay, no, we didn't. What did I do wrong? No, not that one. Right, good. So, okay, so we caught the exception there. So that's just a little bit about try. By the way, try can also serve as it wasn't convenient for me here, but as a statement prefix. So you can write things like my$a equals try, I don't know, something, okay? And it will run something, and to $a you'll either get the result, or you will get an undefined value, and then you can look in $exclamation mark for the exception if you can. So that's just a little bit on try. Righty. So now we have dealt with this. Let's take a look at the next piece. Well, the final line of read from a file actually just calls read string. If you remember, we got rid of $class. That was where we shifted the class at the start. So we got rid of that line. We can just use self now. So we just say self.readString. We pass the contents along. Okay, and we're done. Saving object to a file is actually a very, very, very similar bit of work that we just did. I'm not going to repeat all of this in detail. This time, again, we got rid of the self. We got rid of that by making it a parameter. Okay, so that's those two lines gone. And just like we have slurp for reading a file, we have spurt, which I mentioned yesterday, for spurting out a file. And all I've done is just change that method call there, okay, just to be a normal self dot instead. And then use try to make sure we get the lazy behavior we wanted with the exceptions. Okay, so that whole method actually becomes a very concise one-liner, which isn't so bad. Okay, let's look at read string. This is where the fun really starts. Because read string is parsing. It's parsing CSS. So the first thing that I did when I went and was porting this is I looked at this line and I was like, oh, you've got to be kidding me, what the heck? And of course then I realized, oh yeah, it's that idiom. Okay, what on earth is the idiom here? Anyone tell me what that first line is doing?
It's looking if there's a class, and if it isn't, it's doesn't.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so what we're actually doing there is, yeah, just doing this bit of less logic. I don't like this, and partly because it's not quite so clear what it's doing, but the other thing is that if we actually started to put some interesting initialization logic somewhere for this class, we're not actually calling a real constructor anymore, and that's slightly bothersome to me. So anyway, what I rewrote this as is just my $self. Okay, we take self. If it's already an object, it's great. Okay, it's a defined value. We're good. If it's a class, the class is just an undefined value. That's the way we actually think of them. We don't have an undef in Perl6. We have every sort of type object, we call them. Every sort of non-instance of the class is an undef. And that means you always know what type of undefined you have. But what we can do is we can actually just say // self.new. Okay, I think that's actually a decently clearer than the idiom there. Okay, so either this is an object or we make a new one. And we're actually using the real constructor there. So to me that's a little improvement. Again, of course, sub to method. So what next? The next thing that happens is that we're shifting the string to read. Well, I know that which becomes a parameter of that. Okay, so that was easy enough. And what on earth is going on with these two? Well, the comment gives us a nice hint. Okay, they're flattening white space and removing comments. So at this point, of course, I start to get a little bit nervous as a compiler writer because I can already see that this is a multi-pass parsing solution. And as soon as we see those, we're like, oh no, oh no. But we'll deal with that later. So what we'll do is actually bring these two together. Now, a few changes to note here. One of them is that when we write the say global, we don't go and put it on the end over there. We actually bring it out up front. This colon G thing, by the way, that's a colon pair again. Okay, it's that colon something syntax returning again and again. So there we have that, and then we can just put it to its slashes. The syntax for multiple bits of white space that we want to flatten into one, we can actually do it just by matching any two white space characters, okay, and replacing those. And then what we'll do here is we will then go and just look for comments and strip out the comments as well. So what we've done is actually merged those two lines into a single operation, where we've looked for bits of white space or comments and just substituted a single space in there for them. That's just turning two passes into one pass, which is a little bit better, and using new syntax. Okay, the star there, just to be clear, is actually with a 2 dot star. That's a range. Okay, that's a range from 2 to infinity. And when we put star there, it's saying, well, I want to have this many characters. Okay, so that's 2 or more bits of white space. Okay, so the next problem we'll get, if you actually try and run this code, and you're actually changing the string here, you'll actually get an error. And the reason you'll get an error is that when we take parameters in Perl6, we actually take them read-only. And if you want to modify them, then you either need to be very clear that you want to modify the original thing that was passed, in which case you write is RW, or you say I want my own copy of the thing to work on, in which case you say is copy. Okay, so we've said is copy there. Right at the end, we'll actually get rid of that again, once we've done some further cleanups, but for now we leave it. Okay, what next? Well, we now want to go and start transforming this for each loop, which actually splits that string into the different styles that are in the style sheet. So the first thing to notice is that there's no for each, it's just called for now. C-style for loops are written with the loop keyword, so for is always the thing you want. You'll also notice that I got rid of the parentheses, they're no longer needed. So that's the first little step of transforming this. What next? Well, next up, we'll just change it around a little bit. Show you something in this code here. Okay. Grep, split, but wait, we do the split, and then we grep, okay? You actually have to build up a little stack in your head when you write the code like this. You have to remember, when you're reading the grep, you're actually grepping the results of doing the split. And for me, it's sometimes a little easier to read these things. If I say we take the string, we split it, and then we grep the things we got after splitting. Okay, it just reads in the order the operations happen, which to me is a little easier to follow. So what are we going to do here? Well, split, actually, we'll just keep that regex as it is. We'll fix that in a moment. And for grep, there's actually a little shortcut. You don't have to go and write a block there anymore. You can just pass the regex straight off to grep, and that just works. Okay, so that gets rid of a little block. So what about the that regex? Does anyone else have trouble remembering these look-aheads and look-behinds? Because I have to look them up almost every time. Okay. In Perl6, they're a little longer, but the naming is a bit better. This one is just saying after a closing curly. Okay. So what I want to do is split the string at every position that is immediately after the closing curly, which is the way that it breaks it up into different styles. So that's much easier to just glance and read than this, I think. Okay, I can tell from the intent of this that that's a look ahead, but or a look behind. But here it's very clear. Okay, and we want to split after we've seen a closing curly bracket, and we can quote it rather than backslash it. Oh, what of this? Okay, so unless just like for and if and while and all of these things no longer needs to have the parens there, we toss those. Then we also know that we can do the sort of familiar error reporting transformation. So here we were sort of doing the error. Okay, now we'll just do the fail. So that just simplifies things a little bit. And what now? Well, we need to port this regex. Okay. Now, well, the first thing to notice is that in Perl6 you have the sort of /x option on by default. So we don't actually have to, go and we'll have this thing crammed together. We can go and put some spaces in. Once we do that, we can start to be able to read it. It's some white space, and then it's a character class of anything that is not the opening curly, and then it's some white space, and then it's an opening curly, and then it's sort of slowly, going greedily, and grabbing stuff, the closing curly, maybe some white space in the end of the string. Okay? So, how do we now deal with this in Perl6? Well, the first thing I'm going to do is take those things that were backslashed and quote them. Okay, I think that just looks a little bit nicer. So that's a straightforward transformation. And then the next one is that the character classes are a little bit different. In Perl6, we've stolen square brackets to mean non-capturing group. Because to be honest, you normally want that more often than you want to write custom character classes. Most of the time, you write things like \w, or you refer to one of the built-in character classes that we have, like alpha, the alphanumerics, rather than writing down that yourself. So what we actually did is we stole the square brackets for that, the non-capturing group, and character classes now fall within this, this sort of general syntax here for doing some kind of meta operation. So the angle brackets surround it, and then we can plus and minus. Let me just write a few of them out for you, just to sort of let you see the pattern. So if I was to write a character class that had A, B, and C in it, okay, then I could do ABC, okay. So you can see that's a lot like what you might write in Perl5. It's just that you've added the angles around it. But if I wanted to, for example, have anything that's not ABC, you could negate it, okay? That is actually the same as what I originally had. So that and that are the same. But you might be guessing where this is going. You can actually start to do some math. So what if I want anything that's in \W apart from A, E, I, O, U? Okay, get rid of the vowels. You can just do sort of sets, addition, and subtraction of the various bits of character classes as well, which can sometimes be kind of useful. So the syntax has kind of been generalized at the same time we were going and sort of changing it. Oh, one other thing while I'm on it. A lot of the times we've made regexes a little bit more like normal Perl6. So instead of A-Z, you these days write A.Z. It's just a range. Okay. So we've made that be just a little more sort of regular with the rest of the language too. So we'll replace our character classes. So you can see here, I've got a negative character class, that's the minus, and it's the curly brace that we don't want, and then we just do the plus question mark. Those quantifiers stay exactly the same. Okay, that's we call them frugal quantifiers because they're not too eager to grab stuff. And we had a, no, that was the only transform, that's the only character class. Okay, so there we go. Okay, we have more white space fiddling going on. Okay, so we get to this line, and this line here was going and trying to teach you white space again. Okay, this is a little odd, we'll clear it up later, but for now we'll just blindly port it. And all I'm going to do is say you're looking for 2 bits of white space. Okay, so it's white space, 2 or more characters of it, and replace it with a single space. And the G is just poured out. Then, over here, there's another little change that's kind of worth talking about. So, here, we actually turn the 1 and 2 into 0 and 1. The reason
5 minutes.
5 minutes?
Yes.
Really? Okay, thanks. So we turn the 0 and 1, okay, into that. And we do that just because they're actually lookups in the array of matches. Okay, so that's not so bad. And then what you actually get in there is a match object. Okay, it's not just a string; it's an object representing the match. And the reason is that the match is sort of capturing any matches within it. Now, if you're going and building interesting parsers, which you don't really have time to go into today, you have a whole tree of these different match objects. But what that means for us now, is we just care about the string. So I'll stringify it with the tilde. And then we have this little line. What on earth is this line doing? Well, actually, it's all the same sort of transforms we've been doing before. Okay, we'll take the greps, we'll actually put them in the order they happen, and the split as well. So what I'll do is I'm splitting this on commas with white space around them. Okay, I'm grepping out everything that contains a non-white space character, and then over here I'm well, what am I doing here? That wants a fix. Let's see how we fix that. Well, first of all, just need to do one more thing, and that is that if you look in here, you'll notice this comma is just sat there. In Perl6, there's a very, very easy rule about what is syntax in a regex and what is not. Anything that is an alphabetical character, or a digit, or the underscore, that would be matched by \W, counts as just a literal, and everything else counts as syntax. So you never have to guess anymore. So comma is going to be treated as syntax. It doesn't mean anything yet, but if you want to write one, you should backslash it or quote it. Okay, so you'll just quote that there. Then, over here, we just want to deal with this grep. This grep is really weird because you'll notice at the end it returns a 1, okay, which means that it's always true. So we're always going to get all the results. And if we look a little more carefully, we notice that the grep is actually doing a side effect. It's actually mutating the string to get rid of multiple bits of white space. And we might wonder why we actually did the 1 there. The reason we did that is quite simply because this in Perl5 returns the number of times it matched. And in Perl6 it doesn't. It actually returns the resulting string. If you want to go and look at the number of times matched, then you can do that with the $/match variable. But we sort of determined it's probably more useful in many cases to get the resulting string back. Okay, so that's what we do there. So, finally, this object was meant to behave like a hash. In Perl6, objects are not sort of based around hashes anymore. What they actually are things that have attributes. Okay, you've probably seen this in an earlier talk here. So here we have these styles. And what we're actually going to do is we're going to have a hash attribute, and we're just going to list the sorts of methods you normally use when you're treating an object like a hash. That is @key to get a key in the hash, assign key to assign to a key in the hash, and then list pairs, keys, values, and KB is keys and values. And what this will do is it will make sure that if anyone tries and uses my object like a hash, we'll actually go and delegate all of those method calls and map them straight off to this particular thing here. I think this can showed you the handled syntax earlier on. So now, we can take the styles we passed, okay, we get them, and we can just use ourselves like a hash. All we're doing there is just initializing ourselves to an empty hash to put the properties in. And over here, what we'll do is just go and we'll finish readline that, by the way, read string, okay. That was the final step on read string. Over here, what we'll do is we'll just go and look at write string. Very briefly, this one's much easier. And write string basically becomes a method as well. Let me show you a few of the transforms in here. Instead of for each we have 4, we knew that one. This again can just be flipped around. So we take ourself, we grab our keys, we sort them, we reverse them, and this is the nice pointy loop syntax. So instead of my $style out there, it becomes a parameter as a block. And we can do a very, very similar thing over here as well. Okay, so we end up just taking the keys and sorting them. Okay, we just put that in order. And there's a couple more interpolation changes. If you look at this one, we have the slight issue that self won't interpolate. It's not a $ thing, but we can fix that just by putting curlies around it. That's not so bad. And that nicely fixes this. The other one is that we interpolate blocks now, so you need to backslash that thing. That's one way of solving it.
1 minute.
Okay, so finally, what we'll do is we'll recognize that dot is method call now. Okay, so the final thing that we need to do to make this method happy is to turn the dot equals into tilde equals, okay? And what we actually have now is that method sorted out. Clone needs redoing, okay? I'm not really going to go through this. It was falling back to Perl. We end up rewriting it, into the clone module. We end up rewriting it into Perl. Now, if we want to go further than this, we don't actually have time to sort out right now. What we actually have got at this point is a port. Let's put that on the side. Oh, we get rid of the 1 semicolon. Fine. If we actually get to this point, though, what we actually have got is a port of the module that works. Okay, so everything I've taken you through is what you need to make it work. Now, if you want to go any further with this, the next thing to do would actually be to take this stuff and to turn it into a real graph. Now, I don't have time to do that today, but I actually have done a walkthrough of doing this. So if you're curious about seeing that one, you can find it on the slides page of the website for the conference. I'll actually link it from the presentation page there. So you'll be able to take a look at the grammar walkthrough instead. Okay, just to conclude how my module code ended up. Okay, just to show you the results. We actually went from about 131 lines to 100. And the basic transform was not too bad. Making it into a grammar is quite a few more steps, needs a few more skills, but it actually leads to an algorithmic improvement once you go and do that. Okay, it's more work, but you can take a look through this if you're curious and see how I did it. Final thing to mention, here we just went and took the code and transformed it. In the future, you'll also maybe be wanting to use V5, which means you can take Perl5 code and start porting pieces of it to Perl6 and have a given bit of your code be Perl5 and no little bit being Perl6, okay? And then you can sort of go piece by piece. It depends on the nature of the module if you can do that, but this could be quite exciting. Okay, so I think you can sort of see that from various things we've seen on the conference, Perl6 does an awful lot there. This is a really great time to be porting modules. Porting modules is a really great way to be learning Perl6. Of course, if you're porting the tests, you can work test first in this as well. You know, go for the port. Thanks for listening, and have fun doing that.
Right on time.
Right on time. That means I have no time for questions. But yeah, you can catch me afterwards.